All right, I knew y'all would like to just chat. David's got everybody going in the chat on their state plan. For those of you who don't know, David manages our process for your state plans, so he's a good person to know for that as well.
Yeah, and I do know that some of you are definitively the state plan person. I was just hoping I would find out more others are doing it.
And actually, Paul has asked a question about gender, so this is a nice segue into the next section here. I showed this slide earlier yesterday. I just wanted to make sure some of you weren't in that session that you saw it. This is our team of grant managers that we currently have. Ginger is leaving us, unfortunately. She's accepted a job to continue doing federal grants, but for the USGS, so what's that, Geographic Service or Geographic?
United States Geographic Survey.
I knew that David would fix that for me.
Being a cartographer and a geographer.
So Ginger will be with us through the end of September, which we're very thankful for. We are hopefully going to advertise detail to come in for probably about 3 to 4 months to fill her position. And so Paula's question was actually who would be managing Ginger's projects, and they likely may stay with the detail. We may do a little bit of shifting around just on some newer grants and things like that. So it's something we're discussing as a group to try to figure that out. And then some of you remember fondly, I'm sure, Josh Wilkes that left us last May. We have filled his position with one of our term employees. So Marla Collum has assumed Josh's what is a permanent position as a grant management specialist with us. So we're excited to have Marla move into that capacity. That means that we still have 2 empty positions for terms, and we still have my old position, and then we'll have Ginger's position to fill. So we also have a vacant program assistant that we're trying to fill. Unfortunately, these things take a lot of time. So we are doing the best we can. So I appreciate y'all's patience with us, especially with me. I'm still managing like 30 states, and I shouldn't be managing any of them. I'm doing a terrible job. I'm the worst grant manager. But anyway, that's kind of where we're sitting on that front. And then I also just showed, just for specifics, you've met Dara. She's our new program assistant. She just hit 3 months, but we feel like she's been here a good while. And we're hoping to hire another one to help her out. And then for section 106, if you haven't worked with Olivier yet on 106 and NEPA, you probably will. He's a contractor in our office to do technical review and assist Jennifer Wellock, who's the lead for us on all things technical and flood related. So she's also one of the authors of the flood guidance. So we're very proud of her for getting all of that accomplished. We will be hiring a new financial contractor that hopefully will be in October. So that's kind of where we sit, just to remind y'all on the staffing front in case you missed that earlier. So our afternoon session is we want to talk about subgrants. I know they're so much fun, but if anyone can commiserate with you about managing grants, it is the staff at CLPG. We manage a lot of them. But I wanted to kind of just give some overall locations on where to find information, especially that's on our website. Staff is very good about making shortened URLs so you can find these things a little bit easier. We have condensed our reporting page, and so you can go straight to that if you like. We have some sample documents up there. And then any information on COVID as we know it, we have been posting online. Some of that is a little slow to get to us sometimes, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. If you're having any issues with ASAP, you know that's the system to get your money. That will not change as we move into grant solutions. We'll continue to use ASAP, and that will continue to be operational. I think there's like a 3-day window that it closes down at the end of the year. But that is about it, and they will notify you of that on the website. And then the Department of Interior has a page on grant solutions. that'll kind of give some big picture details on the grant solutions. Again, for all of you, I wouldn't worry about it too much until you get into it. It does look to be a fairly intuitive system, but we will definitely be doing more training for you as that goes forward. Okay. So this is kind of our afternoon discussion, and I only have one slide. So that means we're going to do a lot more talking than listening, right? Wanted to kind of kick it off with COVID. We talked in grant manager training a lot about referencing Park Service grant agreements with your subgrants. So I thought we should probably touch on that with all of you. Corey is going to tell us about his amazing accomplishment with getting 5-year subgrant contracts that you all will be probably jealous of. So he doesn't have to do it every year. We're going to walk through again just quickly about updating your CLG contacts now that you see that we're actually using them for things. James is going to show us things that have updated in the HPF Online and talk about how to make your new password. And then he's also going to talk to us about the digital product submission. So when you have products at the end of the year that you need to send to us, what's the best way to do that, et cetera, and so forth, and where we store those. So I think another topic we probably should include is just, and maybe we can throw this under COVID, is how y'all's offices are operating. You know, we hear rumors about furloughs and layoffs and things like that. And if there's any questions you have for us on the federal side of things, we certainly can answer those. So with that being said, let's dive into talking about COVID. So we have been issuing some guidance throughout this strange time of our lives. Since March, the OMB, Office of Management and Budget, did issue guidance for all financial assistance based on COVID. And that was, came out probably, I think around in April. And it gave us some parameters, some authorities with the grants that was very helpful. So we could extend things, you could use you could continue to pay salaries as long as it was being done equally with other federal funding or your general policies, those types of things. The majority of those authorities have now ended. Except for the ability to continue to pay salaries. And that's all detailed on our website. But that is from our perspective. And as I said yesterday, if you're still encountering, and some of this may be new that you didn't know before our authority ended on June 19th, which was a rather random day, that you need extensions. As I said, for your state grants, we have to extend the entire grant. So we can't just extend your subgrants. But we can do that, and I do have the authority as an agreements officer, if you have exceptional circumstances, which I would call this, that we could grant an extension. So several of you responded even yesterday and said you were in need of some extensions. So definitely try to get those to us by the end of the week, because then if we don't do it before then, we won't be doing it until the end of October, because we won't be able to access any systems. So I'd want to kind of lay that out there. I think we're being pretty flexible about the COVID situation. We know that, you know, you already have some timing constraints in your CLGs, grants, and the subgrants, and getting those done in time. So certainly we don't want to add more to that issue. I do caution you that we are going to ask you to get those grants done, though, because the last thing you want to have is 3 or 4 or 5 grants open at the same time. That is a sure way to head towards failure. We have seen it happen. And so we want to make sure we're closing out that older funding and keeping it moving. So, so I guess I would open this up right now to, do y'all have any questions about that, or any of the COVID guidance we gave out, or you giving guidance to your communities that might be worth sharing with others on how you're dealing with like your reporting and your paperwork? One other thing I should mention is there's been a new update to the 2 CFR 200 that guides all federal financial assistance. There were several updates. The most pertinent one that seems to apply to you is that we now are giving you 120 days to do final reporting instead of 90 days. We haven't had that authority come down to us yet, so we're still going with the 90 days. So your end of year reports will still be due December 31st as of right now. But just know that that might be something you see come up if you have other federal grants, or a community has another federal grant and says, hey, why don't we get 120 days? That is a change that has come in. So, and with that, I'm going to open up the chat. And if my other teammates for SteelPG are on here and want to chime in, feel free. Let's see. Okay. We've had some, so Catherine Barrier's saying we have some concerns about getting grants done from the fiscal year 20 grants because of delays in contracting for the current CLG grants. That is perfectly understandable. It's a little hard to let a contract when you don't know if you can even go and do the work, right? So if you wanted to ask for an extension for your 2020 grant now, you can. So in fact, I would encourage you to just go ahead and do that while we're closer into the COVID kind of crisis time, so we can kind of use that as a justification for that. Corey, I need the extension requests. Actually, I really need them by Monday. So I am completely locked out of our system on the 15th. So if you can get those in by Monday, it doesn't mean we can't do one later, especially on your 20 grant, because it continues for another year. But it would be nice to kind of have these extended and done. So all we need to do that is an email from you. Give us the grant number, give us the reason why you need it, and give us the approximate date you think you can complete the grant by, and we will extend it to that date. And I might come back and ask you, are you sure 3 months is enough and you don't need 6 or 12? And you can let me know. But we can extend up to 1 year, but that's all. Okay, so that's kind of the story on that. Any questions?
Megan,
I'll stop talking.
Megan, this is Katrina.
Hi.
So for our 19 grant that's extended until next year, because you did grant us an extension, thank you. We're just going to report on that as if that, instead of it being the end of the grant, we're going to do sort of a mid-cycle report like we would if it was the second year coming up of the grant, right?
That's a really good question. Yeah, so you'll just do kind of an end of year report instead of a closeout report like you do for the one you're closing. I would update as much as you can in the PADB. You won't have a carryover statement. Those kinds of things will be a little different. But I assume what for most of you we will have kind of carrying over is a few subgrants or maybe all your subgrants that need a little more time. So we'll be kind of looking to kind of make sure every other parts are closed out. And then within the closeout letter that we write, you will identify what those things are that you're carrying over. So you'll know. And then when you finish it, which you can finish at any time, you don't have to wait till the deadline. You'll just update the PADB and submit a new 425. And that should be about all you need to do in any products and those types of things like you would normally for a subgrant. That makes sense. Am I leaving anything out, team? No, James is giving me a thumbs up.
Maybe just the 428.
The 428 is annual, so if they complete, if you finish before another year, you wouldn't have to do a 428 again unless you bought equipment, I think is correct, right?
Every year.
Right. So if you go a whole nother year on this grant, then you'll have to do a 428 again. 428 series for equipment purchases. Some of you may not even see those forms and you're very lucky. Okay. Any other, some of you may have done with us where we have allowed you to use some of your CLG recapture on like a training or another project. So we've extended that grant a little bit. It'll be a very similar process to that. So if you've done that before, that's what it'll be like. So you'll just be reporting to us on those pieces that you needed the extension for, and then we will have to have a final 425 at the end that shows you've drawn down all your funding. Any other COVID or issues in that department? Okay. Are any of y'all experiencing kind of office situations due to COVID that you might want to share with each other or if we can be helpful. I mean, I know we tend to face some states threaten to furlough their SHPO employees and things like that when we go to shut down. And I often have to send out a note that reminds people that you have your federal money, it's in your account. ASAP is always considered essential, so it does not shut down with us. And it wouldn't shut down during this. So just because there might be funding issues on our side doesn't mean you should be having them. I would say with COVID, it's similar in that you still have your grant funds, your federal grant funds, nothing's affected that. In fact, you have more than you did a few years before. So as long as you're working on federal programs, you should be able to, you know, continue to work on those and be paid through the federal funds and that type of thing. But I realize match and those types of office situations can come into play, but I just wanted to throw that out there if you want to talk about it at all.
The only thing here in Florida is that we've got a good hiring freeze going on. So I have no idea when it will end. So all the paperwork for Megan's position for CLG has been submitted. And I made an argument that this is federally funded. It's not state funded. So please give me the person I need. But we will see what happens. I mean, we're pretty short, not just in my section, but in our compliance review.
No.
You're breaking up, so maybe turn off your video when you're talking. It might help with bandwidth.
We've had the usual attrition occur, but no new hires. Me better now? Yeah.
Okay. Let's say we have a couple questions.
Megan, can I comment on that, the hiring freeze in Florida? Wisconsin, we also statewide had a hiring freeze for the agencies, but our SHPO argued that we were essential employees simply because the compliance reviews didn't stop coming in, tax credit reviews kept coming in, all of that. So we've actually hired 2 tax credit reviewers and a compliance person during the hiring freeze because of the essential employees. So you may want to attack it that way too.
That's interesting.
That's how our SHPO and DSHPO have been making an argument, especially for the compliance people, that those are essential. We're drowning in a whole bunch of FCC cell tower reviews. Our compliance people are like reviewing 1,000 projects a month right now in total for their entire section. It's ridiculous. So they've got the highest priority, and I think their positions have been advertised. But for my CLG position, here it's always been kind of not full-time 100% CLG. They've always done either like planning or National Register on the side. It's a little bit more difficult to say we need another full-time person. So we're trying to make the arguments and work through our state bureaucracy, but we will see what happens. You know, since we have no income tax, the state runs off of sales tax essentially and some property tax. And so we will see what that's going to do to our state budget for this coming fiscal year. Yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine this will be something we're dealing with for a little while, right? Michael Coop had a question about, he said, one of our CLGs received a grant earlier this year and they had to decline it because they lost their match due to budget issues. Are we required to go through a second competitive process that would include notifying all our CLGs of the additional funds? I don't think, as long as you have a documented process and you have an alternate, maybe that didn't receive the funding, I think it'd be fine to go ahead and select them. Or we could look, I think, Michael, we did some extensions. You might be able to run that money with either your 2020 money or your 2021 money, however that would work out. So that might be an option. I know a lot of you depend on the CLG match to make your 40% match to us. But if you don't depend on it, that's why I often recommend in your state procedures that if you identify a percentage, you do give yourself an out so that at the discretion of the state office due to emergency situations or something like that, you could waive the match. So in a situation like that, maybe that would be a possibility. But it would be difficult to do it for one and not do it for all the others. So, but I think does that answer your question, Michael?
More or less. I think the issue is that Minneapolis's grant was for 20,000. But then in addition to that, there was a separate grant to another city that was applying to host our statewide conference for next year. And given that we're not doing a live conference this fall, we're actually postponing the one that was going to host this fall till next year. So the city that applied for the funding for 21, we're telling them, we'll give you the money for 22. They'll have to reapply. But the point is, when the application process was occurring much earlier this year and we were reviewing everything, you know, we didn't know what was going to happen. So we awarded that grant, and it was about 15,000. So now we're looking at Minneapolis's grant of 20 plus the 15 for the other cities. So we're 35,000 that we've got to re-grant. And to your point about giving it to a city that had submitted an application that wasn't funded, we didn't have any other cities that submitted applications. And I see that Catherine chimed in that they do open up another round. We've done that in the past, but I think the timing is my concern. You know, we're already into September. I just don't know if it's sufficient time, but we need to get that money spent. So just trying to figure out what our options are.
Yeah, I think that would be warranted to ask for an extension, and then you could run it with your other, your next CLG round or something like that. And I know we've extended it some, but we might need to look at a little bit longer or something, because that is a big chunk. Yeah, you don't want to lose that. Certainly, and Catherine kind of said this in hers, you know, if it's early enough, maybe do another round or redistribute it to CLGs that maybe didn't get all the money they needed, or they have extra match, that kind of thing is always an option. Or use it for statewide training. So, you know, Michael, if you wanted to do something like within APC's new disaster community training or something for everyone, that could be something we could look at. We just have to do it in the right way so it counts towards your 10%. But I think we'd be open to be flexible about that.
And ironically, regarding training, one of the grants we did just give was to one city to host a camp. So ordinarily I would say, you know, hey, let's open it up for somebody to do a camp, but we just gave the funding. So we'll be talking with you, I'm sure.
Okay, that's what we're here for. Let's see.
Michael, as a suggestion, this is something we did in Idaho a couple years ago. We actually hosted a series of camps. We had some leftover money and ended up doing 3 camps around the state. That way we could double up on some of the internal administration costs. And at least here in Idaho, it seemed to go off fairly well. We got some folks who normally wouldn't come in. So, you know, I wouldn't think that hosting another camp would be a bad thing.
Especially in a big state. So I agree.
Yeah.
It would make sense for us, just like it did for you in Idaho. Yeah. Thanks.
Kind of like, I guess, we talked about yesterday, Louisiana does too, like north and south, or yeah, so they're all options. Good. Preservation plans are always something I support because they're good for them. Okay, any other burning kind of COVID related issues? Okay, you know we're here to answer questions if you need us. The second topic I just wanted to touch on was referencing the Park Service grant agreement. So we had a pretty involved conversation about this at HPF grant manager training, and I know several of you were at that training. And I know some of you get more involved in the subgrant process than others. But we have, if you haven't seen the grant agreement, I would suggest you ask to take a look at it. It is 40 pages. The agreement that gives you your money from us. And it does reference a lot of things that per the 2 CFR 200, you, by subgranting, take on the responsibilities of the federal agency. So we've, for quite a while, asked our Financial Assistance Policy Office, what of all the things you put in that grant agreement, which is a lot, what are the things that have to go into a sub-grant agreement to give you some guidance? And could you create a template for us? So far, the answer has been no, we won't make a template because it'd be too different state to state. So I know some of your states take our grant agreement and you incorporate it into yours, and then you have a very long sub-grant agreement. Some of you may not do that at all. What we have kind of encouraged is that you do it either by attachment or by reference, just so you are covered by all the things that are in that grant agreement. So there are a lot of things that there's no way we're going to monitor, like are you talking on your cell phone while you're driving? Are you wearing your seatbelt, you know, while you're doing some work on the grant? Are you doing human trafficking? We hope that's not the case. But there's also going to be some monument language in there, and that will apply to local governments, who you are sub-granting to. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up, and I'm happy to have folks comment about that, maybe know how they're handling that. It is a long grant agreement and it can be intimidating. So even if you referenced it on your website with a link, we did kind of get guidance from our financial support people that maybe having something in your sub-grant agreement that said, we certify that we understand the federal grant agreement, and that we know it's in play. That would be a helpful kind of thing to do. When we move to grant solutions, the grant agreement, it becomes part of the system. And so there are, and it's true now, there are parts of that grant agreement we can change and there are parts we cannot. So some of the clauses that have caused issues with y'all's attorneys, like insurance and indemnity and those types of things, those are actually going away a little bit in the new version, but we're not really using that new version until we move to grant solutions. So we're not quite sure what it looks like when it comes out of that system. It will still probably have an appendix of the programmatic type of requirements that we place on you that comes at the end. So I just say all this kind of in a warning of, just be prepared for 2021 that we might have to kind of figure this out. They have told us they're going to shorten our grant agreement and do a lot of it by reference, which they weren't allowed to do before. So that might get better. And so that just something I wanted to give y'all a heads up about and see if you had any thoughts or concerns about that. And I have a whole team of people that can answer this, but anything, and some of you are like Curry saying that you added it this year and Kansas did too. No one freaked out in Kansas. That's a good, that's good. I would freak out if you gave me that grant agreement to look at. Anybody have any issues with that, or is that working well, or is this the first some of you have heard about it and are very confused, or anything? Silence is very good on that topic. Okay. So just a heads up. All right. And if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to your grant manager. It's something we're kind of, we kind of are making up our own policy to try to handle it with a lack of guidance. All right.
Actually, sorry, Megan, this is Curry. I just wanted to jump in and say that while it's longer, I sometimes find it better to have the actual language than have the references, because I really do read these agreements to make sure we're meeting stuff. And if I have to go look in 12 places to find what we have to do, that's kind of a pain. So other people probably disagree, but we've actually started having longer agreements that just have all the information in it, so people don't have to go multiple places, and they seem to have liked that. So. And I can do that process for them if yours change, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Great. No, that's good to know. I'm just proud that you read the grant agreement. Okay, let's talk about multi-year grant contracts that Pennsylvania did. And I spoke in error that Corey was going to talk about this. We've heard enough from Corey today. It's going to be Elizabeth. So you want to share with us the miraculous thing that you have accomplished?
Yes, indeed. Corey was talking earlier about our kind of burning down and rebuilding of our whole CLG program. And one of the things that we've realized over time is just the length of time that it takes us to get things approved on a contract by contract basis. Everything takes always much longer than you think it will, just getting it back from the municipalities, and then through the multiple layers of state government to get everything approved, it's also just a slog. So we were having a conversation with our relatively new fiscal officer. All of our fiscal operations happen within our agency, but sit in another building from us. So there's, you know, complications in getting that communication quite on par too. And he had mentioned that in other agencies he's worked with, they had a kind of open-ended multi-year agreement under which you could issue funds. And would that be something we'd be interested in? And we said, absolutely. One of the things that we often have trouble with, always have trouble with, is giving away small amounts of money for scholarships, for reimbursements, for, you know, expenses, for all kinds of things. And we've always had to have a municipality contract with a nonprofit and funnel the money that way so that they can issue small amounts of money at $100 at a time. Because under our system, we would have had to have a separate grant contract for every single amount of money we gave away, which would mean months and months of signature process for $100. So our fiscal folks said that if we created this multi-year contract, we could simply create, you know, funding agreements under that contract and issue the money much more quickly and much more easily. So we were very excited about this. They handed us a template from another agency, which we were able to modify and then have our lawyers look over for quite some time. And we finally came to an agreement as to what the model language would be. So the contract is going to run from 2020 until December 31st of 2024. We sent them out to every municipality and have been answering questions that they have about what exactly this means. Because so many of them have just signed their recertification agreement. So now we're asking them to sign another document. So there's a lot of confusion about that. Many of them have already signed and returned. So as they chug through our signature process, it's really the only time that every lawyer, the comptroller, you know, our fiscal folks, our executive director, and their municipalities all have to review this contract. In the future, they'll be looking at a funding release form that basically says, this is how much money you asked for, this is how much money you're getting, and a standard work plan template that they'll get detailing the requirements to get the money, and a standard budget form that they'll have to, you know, submit showing how they're going to spend it. We are truly hoping that this will help us give away all of our money and help us give away smaller amounts of it. We really want to get away from only giving out big grants. We'd love to get into the process of doing kind of a mid-cycle mini grant for maybe $5,000 or $10,000 to kind of chip away at some of those things that the municipalities are still working on to adhere to our new guidelines. Maybe they need a little bit more money to go into design guidelines, or they need a little bit of money to have someone come in and review their ordinance for them. We'd love to support communities in that way instead of only supporting, you know, a $25,000 project. So we're really hoping that this will be the answer to our fiscal prayers. And we are, you know, working with our fiscal office to streamline some of the approval processes for grant products, for quarterly reports. We're taking over some of those responsibilities in-house as well, instead of leaving it all to our fiscal folks, which I think will help. We're very excited about this 5-year grants, and a lot of the municipalities have had a very positive response to it.
Great. Has anyone else tried this? This is the first I had heard about it. It sounds kind of exciting. Okay.
If anyone's interested, we have a template that we can share. Maybe you could tweak it to work in your state.
I was gonna ask, are you willing to share more documents? But
absolutely.
There's a question that does Pennsylvania award this money competitively?
Oh, absolutely. We do an annual call for applications. We just put it out for for October is when the applications will have to come in, and that's really for our big grant cycle. If we were going to do a mini grant cycle, we would issue the same call for requests for proposals for the money, and then our scholarship funds are available to anyone across the Commonwealth that's affiliated with CLG.
I think this is a common issue, and of course timing is all of our issues. It's beyond our control. The budgets keep getting later. They don't sign the apportionment for 3 months. It takes us 3 more months to get you the money, and then you're already like, the CLGs are already lost their first year, right? So we've even had conversations in our office about, do the grants need to be 3 years? What is there some way to solve this so that we're not so much at the mercy of other forces, I guess. So I like this idea. I hear a lot of times the failure of the CLG grant is they couldn't get the contract through either the state office or the local office. So yeah, this is you're very excited people to see your example.
Sure.
We just got the first batch of the of 6 fully executed agreements back from the lawyers yesterday. So this is a remains to be seen work in progress situation. But nothing changed about the competitive selection process for the funding. It's just once we get into it, we have the ability to shortcut a lot of there are 3 lawyers and the comptroller who need to sign an agreement, and each of them gets 30 days, and typically takes it. so that was, and the template that Elizabeth referenced actually came from, it's our Department of Community and Economic Development. They issue those same blanket agreements to our municipalities for the LIHEAP, the money that comes through HUD, like the low income housing and energy assistance money. So it's the same process that a lot of these municipalities were already using to access other forms of federal funding from different agencies. So it wasn't something totally bonkers that they weren't familiar with.
So it was new to you, but not necessarily to them.
We do anticipate that a couple of municipalities that routinely edit agreements, even if it's the same agreement they signed the year before, word for word with a date change, will have some comments and some, yes, Pittsburgh, will have some things they want added to it. But as long as as long as our lawyers approve that, it has to do with their status as a Class 1 or Class 2 city in Pennsylvania. So as long as our lawyers can approve that, we can tailor them for individual municipalities as necessary. We don't really want to, but we will, just to get it signed.
Yeah, I think that maybe during COVID, especially, these attorneys are a little bit bored, because I've noticed they're chewing apart our grant agreement too. And I'm like, well, this is a federal agreement, and it's not our job to protect your state, do your state law protection, law protection in it. So that's been a little bit different. But
one of the interesting things about the process was we had gone through the recertification agreement process with our lawyers, and they kept wanting to attach all kinds of state,
I remember,
rules basically to it. And we kept saying, it's not a contract, it's not a contract, it's not a contract. And then a few months later, we went back to them and said, remember how we said that wasn't a contract? Can we make that a contract so that we can use it as our grant agreement? And they just, they came up with this other template that we could use. So it all ended up working out.
Yeah, and y'all ran that by us too, just to make sure.
Yep.
There weren't any issues, which I thought was helpful. Katrina, you're mentioning a MOU process that I didn't know about. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think it probably relates to state regulations and things. We don't have to go through like what Elizabeth's just describing, where it has to go through a bunch of attorneys and comptrollers. We basically, the SHPO staff and the local government, are the only 2 parties that are involved in the contract signing. So on smaller projects where we're just giving them a scholarship or we're just reimbursing them $100 or something for, you know, like you're talking about, Elizabeth, I've had conversations with the NPS staff about, do we really have to do a full, you know, 40-page contract because it's just $100? And the guidance that I understood was that as long as there's some kind of written agreement that references, you know, all of those requirements, and as long as they're still following the requirements, then that's all we need. So we just kind of came up with a really basic, it's kind of like a memo, just a letter that says, my understanding is you guys are doing this. We're agreeing to give you $100. This is the terms that we're asking for. You know, we're going to reimburse you after the conference or whatever. Here's what I need from you in order for me to give you this money. And we both sign it. And it goes in a file. And that's all there is to it. That way we don't have to have a bunch of, you know, multi-layers of signatures or anything like that.
Yeah, unfortunately, most of this ends up with your state policies and your local policies. And, you know, as long as you're following your own procurement policies and that type of thing, then we're okay. That's what the
we have like a $5,000 cutoff. If it's over 5,000, then it gets into competitive bidding and all that. But if it's under 5,000, then you don't even have to have a contract. So we want to have something on file that's written, but we don't have to. So that's the kicker.
Okay. Looks like Corey has shared the magical template for this. So maybe next time we get together, you will all have tried to figure this out. Cool. Okay. Anything else on like trying to get subgrants paid and any issues you might be having or things you've discovered that you want to share? Or even about the process, like timing of the process and those types of things. I know we've talked about this a lot in the past, but for those of you that are new, the Park Service isn't overly concerned when you start your subgrant process. So if your state agency or nonprofit for Ohio is comfortable with putting out the applications for the CLG grants before you get your money from us, and you know, we always recommend you say dependent on funding because anything can happen. We're okay with that. I know some of your states won't do that, or they might need something in writing from us to do that before the application, you know, before you can do that application process. So I know some of you push yours back. You're starting it like at the beginning of the fiscal year, like it should start. But others of you have to wait until you actually have the money in hand from us. So that is definitely something we can help with if, you know, a letter or a note or an email even from us saying that we know the funding's guaranteed. This especially happens a lot when we're on continuing resolution. And we will get like I do anticipate that will happen this year, and we'll get funding through January. We have to make a case to our budget office that we can go ahead and do that partial apportionment to you, which is a pain for all of us because we have to do everything twice, right? But that at least you're guaranteed that amount of money. And usually that means the rest of it's going to come too. So, but if there's something we can be helpful with to help you kind of move your process along, do let us know. If that's an option. Any thoughts on any of that or anything anyone's struggling with on the process side of things? Besides Park Service being slow to review if you're my states.
In Idaho, we released our call for applications starting October 1st, have it due December 31st, and then we decide which projects we're going to fund and then hold it, send out the contracts, let them sign it, but we won't execute it on our end until we've got our notice of funding from the Park Service. And that way, as soon as we have our notice, our executive director can sign and people can get going, you know, usually within a day or two of us getting that notice. So it's a lot of hurry up and wait, but it seems to work.
Yeah, you're ready though. And definitely, like, if those are situations that you're affected by, make sure your Park Service grant manager knows that. And then I always encourage y'all to get your end of year reports in as soon as you can. They don't have to come in on December 31st, all 59 of them. And the same thing with the applications. This year, I would say at least 35%, 40% of the applications came in the last week of April. And for us, especially when we're down staff, to try to get through those, it's difficult. So, I know that everyone applies for grants the last week that they're due. But if you do have the materials and you can go ahead, you can put stuff in the HPF Online early. We encourage you to do that. So, and definitely talk to your grant manager, your Park Service grant manager, about timing issues so that we're aware. I mean, most of us kind of know if we've worked with the state for a long time that, y'all are one of those that runs out of money in June for sure and that kind of thing. But given that we have a lot of new staff managing grants and kind of like Madeline picked up some of mine this year, and then Josh left and I picked up his. So we may not know you as well as we know some of our states. So do feel free to communicate those situations to your grant manager so we have some understanding of what you're dealing with. Okay, well, why don't we shift over? Dara's gonna talk to us a little bit more about updating CLG contacts, which shouldn't be too complicated. Dara, do you wanna tell them what the plan is going forward?
Really simply, we identified a number of contacts that were out of date in our database, and I have broken those out by state. There's 45 different states that I've identified, and some of those spreadsheets include just one contact. So it may not be that much work. It just may be correcting one little thing, but just making sure that we're all on the same page. So that we can reach people about opportunities. We use this information, as you can see on the Gateway app. We've used this information as part of the Section 106 consultations. So it's really important for us to know what's going on the ground and be able to reach people. So I can reach out to you with that information. If it's easiest, you can go back in the database, just add that one person back in and we should all be on the same page because as we know, data is only as good as it is current.
That's true. And if y'all don't remember your password to your admin access to the online database, we can share that with you.
I need access. I haven't had access since I started.
You can work on that.
I appreciate that.
We're trying to get Illinois caught up and he's stuck.
Right.
Not a good place to be.
No.
We'll get there, I promise.
We are.
Okay, that would be great. And we'll try to make it easy on you. If you have a lot of changes, you can send us a new spreadsheet and we'll dump it in.
Yeah, if that's the best way to do it, that would be great too. And then we'll update everything on our end, like the Gateway app and everything from what you put in.
There's a question from Paula about, she's asking about one contact or two. I think right now it's just set up to provide one. That would be a database change, but we could definitely add that to our wish list. Unfortunately, the CLG database is a little far down on our page. So I would say put in the contact that you think is most likely to do something with the information. Would be my kind of advice on that. But we'll make a note about could we add in a second contact. It's not a bad idea. Okay, so we are gonna shift to everyone's favorite, the HPF Online. And James is gonna walk us through the password situation. Some of you may have gotten emails saying we needed to change our password. We haven't changed them in 20 years. The Internet Police has caught up with us, or IT Security Office. Therefore, we now have to have individual passwords and logins. Those will be based on your email And you have to change your password every 6 months. So I know someone wrote us back and said they were sad because this is the only password they could still remember because it hasn't changed so long. But it's time to update. So even I have to change my password, which will be a problem. So James, do you want to
share screen
and talk about adding roles? And I do think this might be an opportunity for more people to be in the HPF Online and use it effectively. So maybe you guys can share some of those additional hats you've been given and get some help. So I'll stop talking and let James run through the password situation and then the updates that we've made to it. Thank you, James.
Welcome. Okie dokie. So, yeah, as Megan was saying, everybody who currently has an account for the new HPF Online single user account system has been emailed. If you on this this Zoom at the moment have not been emailed, you do not currently have an account as initially furnished, and it will need to be requested. The way to request an account is an email from or a signed letter from the SHPO or somebody with designated signature authority by the SHPO. And all that letter has to specify is the state for which you're being added, the name of the person being added, and the email address of the person being added. And that's all we need. And we can quickly create an account and send it right back and respond to that letter, and also send the person who the account has been created their account information, which generally speaking is the email address as username, and then a temporary password. Any password that is furnished to you by STLPG, usually directly from STLPG@nps.gov, is a temporary password. As I'm going to demonstrate right now, when you get a temporary password, the system is going to first ask you, when you put in that temporary password, to change your password. So we're going to go in with one of the test accounts, which actually works, goes into Texas. So we'll be seeing a little bit of Texas soon. But logging in, you put in your username, which should almost always be your email address. And then we put in the password and hit login. That takes us to this big change password screen, which puts up at the top the password policy, which must be 12 characters and containing a variety of characters. And then also it can't be the same one as any of the last 24 passwords. So you do have to change things up and use a complex password. So put in the temporary password at the top, and then your new password in the other two fields. If you enter a password that's not compliant with the policy, it will throw you up an error message and tells you which of the two issues it's coming up against. Either A, that it's not long enough and has the correct number of characters, correct type of characters, or B, that it's one of the ones as previously used and you need to come up with something else. If you navigate away from this page without completing this, your temporary password will not be changed, which means that the next time you try to log in with, you need to use your temporary password as previously furnished, and it will take you to this screen again. If you are trying your hardest and nothing seems to be working, please contact STLPG@nps.gov and we'll troubleshoot your issues. Let us know very specifically what you were trying and at what point things failed. A screenshot as well is lovely. Okay, so we hit password reset, and now we will log in with our new password. So it will, when you do a password reset, it will send you back to the front to have you log in with your new information. Then when you enter, everything is the same as it was before. You're still working as your state. Everything on the left is the same. You still got your application, your end of year report, your NEPA checklist. If you have a disaster grant, then you will also have access to that specific disaster's HPF project activity database module specific to that disaster. We've updated HPF Forms a little bit. And then also down further, you now have the ability to change your password yourself for your specific account. And it does indeed need changing every 90 days. And it's pretty much the same page. It tells you up at the top what you need to do for a password. And it's again, tells you who you are, put in your current password, put in your new password. Just got to double check the chat at the moment and see whether or not any questions have come in. Actually, I seem to be having trouble pulling up the chat, so somebody could read me out if there's any particular questions at this moment that logging in or getting furnished an account.
Okay. James, I think the main questions were just who do they send the request to? And that's CLPG and NPS.gov, and then Dara provided a sample of the letter that we're looking for.
Excellent, thank you much. Perfect, perfect. So then let's take a look at HPF Forms. That got a nice big change at the moment, and it lays out all the forms required for your annual grants. So it has the SF424s, the LLL, organization chart is here, though we don't have a template for it. Certification of staff for, and review board qualifications. We now have a nice little fillable PDF that you can use that's downloadable right there over to the right. Your indirect cost rate, if you are eligible for the 10% de minimis, the 425, everything you need for your annual grant. And it's broken up at the top. It lays out what the form is, when do you need it, and what you're using it for, and who to send it to. So this is submitting through the grants.gov workspace versus down here you have things like email it to your grant manager or uploading into or generating in HPF Online. Okay. And also down here, under the user guide, the disaster module is generating changes that are going to flow back up to the annual grants to your benefit. One of the such things was the creation of a user guide specific to the disaster Padb, which we will now then take which has finished, though it has not been added to HPF Online. It has been shared around, but we are now also going to update the user guide for the annual grant using it. So some of the stuff is a little bit out of date over on the user guide here, and it will get updated. So you have that to look forward to. And then we can dive into the Padb, which has some updates to it as well. Okie dokie. So if we dive into the Padb, all the way at the bottom, it is now possible to attach files directly to the Padb project. There is not terribly much in the way of limitations on what you can attach here. There is no specific file size limit, and everything I've tested for types has gone up in terms of PDF, Word, documents, spreadsheets, image types. I haven't tested any video formats or the like, or any of shape files or the particularly large and special file types. The thing about size that I will not guarantee about large file sizes is that still, it's that interaction between your internet, the server on the other side. So when you start getting above 100 megabytes, it might just hit the point where it just times out, or even as well, there's the 2-hour limit of no activity on HPF Online, where it will then log you out anyway. So particularly large things, attaching them here still might not be the best route. And you can still use the request from STLPG at nps.gov, a secure file transfer link. And Caitlin will then contact you with the details for uploading to the secure file transfer site. She's our office expert at the moment and can negotiate your way through any issues with secure.nps.gov. Yeah. And then
No, there's a typo, although we like the French sounding attachement.
Whoops. Much of the rest is the same still at the moment. There's the ability at the top that's still being developed slightly, but the ability to attach related projects. So by clicking this button, you can both select projects from any fiscal year that you have in the PADB to create that inter-project relation in the database. At the moment, it just shows at the bottom the PADB number, so that TX-20-100008. And soon enough, I plan to get IT to develop that further into providing also the project title and maybe a short description. So, and the ability to navigate swiftly between all related projects. That's the updates at the moment to the project activity database and HPF Online. Anybody else of SteelPig have anything I'm forgetting at the moment?
James, just a question from Katrina. Is the file attachment section just for our use, or does the grant manager want to see certain things attached? Maybe the sub-grant application or contract. And my response was really it's for y'all's use. To kind of keep track of things, but if we have a question, we may ask you to attach some documents to help us answer those, but we're still kind of sorting through whether this will be where you store the final products or you'll send them via FTP, right, James? And here is the email. It's real easy. It's steelpig at nps.gov. You can find everything out by emailing it. That email. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? I mean, now's your chance. James kind of taken over my role as the database guru. So if you have anything that drives you crazy about the database, now would be a good time to tell us. But we have made some pretty good enhancements to the disaster side that we'll be carrying over to the state side soon.
And at the moment as well, the next major change coming is for the rural grant program to allow for a PADB for any of you who receive Paul Brune Historic Revitalization Grants.
So those of you that have those active, you'll basically put your subgrants into the HPF Online, just like you do your CLG grants. So trying to keep it a familiar system, but we have to open up access to folks that are not states. Similar to disaster, we had to open it up to tribes. So we've figured that out through the disaster program and now be duplicating that feat for the rural program. So that's kind of our hope. Okay, requirements for the email. James, do you want to say what needs to be in the email for the, is this for the password? I assume so.
if it's for the request, it needs to come from, if it's an email, it needs to come from the SHPO or somebody who has designated signature authority. If it's coming direct by the email, if it's a signed letter as a way to be sent by somebody other than the email account of the SHPO or deputy SHPO, then it can be a signed letter. And Dara shared a sample up top in the chat, and what it requires is just the name, the state. That way we don't have to guess, and then who is getting the account, their name and their email address, and we can create the account. Same thing if you need any accounts closed due to somebody leaving. And then for any technical assistance, including if you forget your password, or if 90 days has passed and your account's been locked down because of it, it's again stlpg@nps.gov. Just send us a quick email, and as long as you have an account in good standing, that we haven't received notice to close that account, then we will handle your account needs direct with you. So.
Okay.
Did that answer the question?
I think so. Oh. Yes. James, would you just go to add a project real quick? I just want to talk about something quickly. Okay, so I just wanted to mention this because I think, at least my sense from Nick Shippo was there might be a little confusion on this, and this is getting a little grant managery, but a lot of you serve that role too. When you are doing the application, you can apply quite, as soon as we kind of officially announce it and get it up on grants.gov, that means you can apply. Like, we've gotten the money situated and are able to accept those. When you initially apply, especially if it's early on, like I think we got it up in December this year, you probably aren't going to know your subgrant projects yet, right? So we are okay with you applying with just entering your in-house projects. So you can see here, it's in-house and then subgrant contract. So your in-house projects at the bare minimum should be something going on in those 8 program areas that are required. And then your application. And that is about what we need. I mean, we have like an org chart and staff certification, those documents. But you certainly can go ahead and apply and then enter your subgrants later. So I do think that's a kind of point of confusion. And my hope is that maybe that'll help all of us apply a little sooner and get those, that application rolling a little bit faster. When you go to do your end of year report, so like this says 2019 end of year report, this is still on last year's, and then 2020 application, come October 1st, this will say 2020 end of year report and 2021 grant application. At any point, you can start working on that application. So you could put your in-house projects in October and have that done and just be waiting to do your 424 when the applications become available. So now, to have your end of year report approved before we can do the application part, but I just wanted to kind of stress that because I feel like we're kind of all getting in a backlog situation, right? And the more we could do to kind of move it, keep moving it forward, helps us with the already all the delays we experience with Congress and approvals and things like that. So does that make sense to everyone? Is that something new or confusing at all? Okay. I just wanted to check on that. And while we're in here, do y'all have any questions about the NEPA process that's in here that's still relatively new, but any issues with that? You all got that straightened out with Olivier this morning, hopefully. Okay.
Fine, Megan, just call me out without saying my name.
I didn't. Believe me, no, it was not.
We did figure it out. Just know that you have to save it on the main thing when you check the box for NEPA. So if you don't save it and then go in and do the NEPA details, that checkbox will not remain.
So you need to enter the project first normally.
Right. And check the box and then save.
Okay.
And then go back in.
Okay, that's good to know.
And enter the details for NEPA.
I will take a moment and emphasize that the system does not, anything you do in any of the fields doesn't save until you hit the button Save Changes, which can be nice if you need to play around the system, test some things out, teach somebody anything about the system, show people how to use it. You can do a lot without actually making any changes. It's only when you hit the Save Changes button that things actually push to the server. So.
And James, we have a new timeout period, right?
Yeah, 2 hours at the moment. If there's no activity after 2 hours, you will automatically be logged out. So, and that means as well that if you had any changes which you had not saved, then those are lost at the moment. So,
so just be real careful to hit that save button a lot. That's what I do.
And then as well, anytime you need to actually show anybody, teach people in the office, things like that, you do always still have the ability to delete projects. So you can create test stuff and delete it. Just, if you're going to create some test stuff and leave it on there for a while, let your grant manager know.
Okay. Any, that kind of wraps us up for the subgrant portion. Are there any questions? It doesn't have to be about HPF Online, but subgrants in general. We can, James, why don't we talk about, I think the next slide in my deck, if you stop sharing, is Irma. So, can y'all see that? I seem to have lost my, sorry, technical difficulties here. I lost my Zoom.
Hover at the top of your screen. You should find it.
Yeah, it wouldn't come. Oh.
Maybe at the bottom?
I'm slow. It's late in the day. Okay, now I got it. Whew. Technology is hard. Okay, so yeah, all it was a slide to show Irma. It's not good. But James, do you want to talk a little bit about the, we have a lot of new folks, so what do we do with all those products that come in, and how does the Park Service deal with them, and what do we want to see? I think those are the important things.
Thanks. So everything that you send to us, and especially everything that both you don't mark as being sensitive to us, and also in our review we don't mark as sensitive, we put up onto IRMA, the Integrated Resource Management Applications, which was originally came from the natural resources side of National Park Service for cataloging all the planning documents with regards to conservation. So there's actually a little bit of a mapping and taxonomy side of it that we don't use, but they do make it available to the Park Service at large. So we've been putting up all the good products that you are generating out of your subgrants, or even as well in-house projects that generate products, and we put that onto IRMA, which is has a public-facing side to it that allows both you or as well anybody to look up and take and see and review and experience everything that you're creating. So it's a way to very much share all the good design standards, plans, survey reports and the like that you're generating, and make it available. So that, again, that not everything, what you're doing isn't alone in a vacuum, and is actually accessible and usable and findable by the public. So we, if you go to irma.nps.gov, it'll take you to the first landing page, and then everything's on the data store of IRMA, so you still have to click through to data store. But then there's also, we have the Historic Preservation Fund as one of the featured contents. So
James, do you want to show that?
Sure.
Okay, I'll stop sharing. You can.
Here we go. Okie dokie. So here's IRMA. And all the way at the top, featured resources. Oh, excuse me. As I was saying, got to go to the data store first. Actually, that was badly said on my part. Go to the data store first, not the search data store, and the featured content of the data store, which then takes you to this much more HTML page, which you can select from the top, Historic Preservation Fund from the featured content, which then has multiple categories of all the good stuff you've been doing, from tourism planning to interpretive planning to historic structure reports, economic impact studies, and then you can hit view report, and that draws from everything that is keyed as Historic Preservation Fund of that type. So then you can see all these good economic impact reports that you've all been producing. So for example, we've got one from Connecticut, Pittsburgh, Thomasville, good stuff. So that's how we make everything available of all the good stuff you've been doing. And especially as well when we get tons of questions from people about good examples of products, we point them to IRMA. Like I say, go look there for historic structures reports, context statements, design guidelines, and the like. And they can shop from there.
And it's also a good place to send communities. Like if they're thinking about doing design guidelines, they can go and look at, I mean, we must have 100 in there that we paid for, you know, to see what kind of format they like, what might work well, good ideas for their community. So this has been a long-term project that I've wanted to do since I became CLG coordinator many moons ago. I finally kind of gotten it up there for, hopefully for y'all to use. So,
and it's pretty close to up to date. So I gotta fact check that with our records management fellow at the moment, Caitlin. But yeah, it's I know she's working on some shipper products at the moment that came in from end of year reports and the like, and that she's pretty darn close to being fully up to date. So at least in terms of the stuff that has been provided to us.
We did get a question about archaeology reports. James kind of touched on this, but we really don't need any extra sensitive information in our office. We need enough about the report to know that it was completed and to have a sense of what it was and where it is, that if someone asked, we could direct them to your office to find it. So if there's like a context that's written that's publicly accessible, or if you want to send us a redacted version, that's fine too, but we're really not looking for, you know, copies of your large survey reports. So I think it's kind of to know that the project was completed and successful, and we trust you to handle that sensitive data a little more than we trust ourselves. And we would definitely not be putting anything like that up on IRMA. We might put the context as long as you're okay with it, so people know where to go for that type of research or information. Or we might just, if you can send us a scanned cover page of the report, so we have something to share, but it doesn't need to be more than that. Any
We
other?
want analysis much more than data.
Yeah.
And then very much feel, great things to do is to put the sensitive stuff in appendices and then just share the body of their report with us, or as well things like executive summaries and conclusions rather than the full item. As well, in terms of previously submitted items along those lines where you have shared the data, you have shared the full and complete report, you may expect that Caitlin might be contacting you or the SHPO in terms of, we have this copy, but is there either by redaction or do you have a public access copy by which we could have to be able to put on IRMA instead of, we ain't putting the sensitive stuff there. IRMA does have layers of security to it, so we can put stuff on there and either specify exactly who can look at it, even just in the National Park Service. We can set it as anybody who is National Park Service can look at it, and then there is then the larger viewable by public. So we don't put stuff up there for public viewing that's sensitive. And if we're worried that something is sensitive, we will contact you before we put it up there. So you don't need to share the sensitive stuff with us, and then two, if you have or if we're concerned something is sensitive, we'll talk with you. So.
We're definitely interested in getting most everything digitally, especially now. Unless you have really good calendars, there's a kind of a calendar competition in the office. So just to keep that in mind, American Samoa is winning right now. So and West Virginia, you have good calendars too. So, but as far as like, if you do a National Register nomination, we don't need that because we can get it through the National Register. Well, maybe we can, but someday we will be able to. So things like that. So it's mainly what is it you can send us that we can share as a successful project with others. So yeah. Any other questions about that kind of piece? Let's see, Steve's got, should we submit archaeology report cover pages and executive summaries as attachments to the PADB record? That's a good question. I think that would be fine. We just got this capability of attaching the PDF to the PADB. That's a lot of P's. So I think James and I were actually started the conversation but haven't had a chance to finish it about, is that the best way for y'all to submit the final products, or are we better off doing them through the FTP site to go into IRMA? So we may need to actually have a conversation with our IT folks about server space to see how much we have. So I guess for right now, let's think of being able to attach PDFs in the PADB as a tool to use, but that we'd still want to have the final product sent via the FTP site or via email of some sort, unless you hear otherwise. And we'll get you an answer before the end of the month so that you'll know how to handle your end of year reporting. Does that make sense, James? I'm making this up on the fly. Yeah. Okay. James, I don't know if all of you know this, some of you probably do. James started as our records management NCPE intern and then became a fellow, and then he ran away and became a term for the park side of cultural resources and records management, and then we lured him back into this term position. So we still rely heavily on his records management skills, and we've been trying real hard to keep, we do have, and you've met several of them, 5 fellows in the office, I believe 5, and we try to keep a records management fellow working with us. We think it's really good experience, and it does help us kind of keep a better handle on our records because we no longer have a basement to store things in. We have one little file room, and so we're sending stuff to NARA and doing things the way we're supposed to. So that's been a big shift for us. And now we're really glad we've done some of this in this weird digital age that we're in now. So, okay, any other subgrant products, grants, yucky grant questions?
I'm just going to ask Paula whether or not she feels that we fully answered her question.
Excellent. He has no microphone, but yes. Okay. Excellent. I love the, like, we're all used to now the pause. We just, okay, well, if we have no more grant questions, how about a break? So everybody need to get up and stretch and be back at a quarter till, well, in 15 minutes, quarter till 5 our time. And then we can kind of, if there's any other burning topics that you have, I kind of want that to be a little free form for y'all for the rest of the afternoon. We kind of have on the agenda to talk about success stories and things like that, but it can be whatever y'all want it to be. So definitely during 15 minutes, think of all the burning questions that you want answered by your colleagues that you haven't gotten answered yet. Does that sound good? Okay, we will see y'all in 15 minutes then. Okay, thanks. Okay. I should put that in the chat.
I'm here.
I'm ready.
Okay, last session. Here we go. Okay. All right. All right. So last little bit, we can talk for as little or as long as you like. My cutoff is like 6:30. I had just typed up a few kind of thoughts that maybe want to share. I know we talked a lot about kind of things that are going wrong, but we've also had some good stuff that we shared. But what are kind of the like really effective and creative projects? We've heard from some of those today. I did want Idaho and the big Western states, as they call the regional meeting, and then Northeast, just to talk a little bit about the regional meetings that they were doing. And I do wonder if this new virtual reality might be a way for us to kind of do those more often, or with other regions, since travel won't be such an issue, and get you in a smaller group with more kind of similar things going on. And then I just wanted to, we talked a little bit yesterday, but just about like your training needs. We can talk about, do you like this? Is it weird? Should we have like these more often, like quarterly or something? I don't know if I can handle that, but, or should we do them maybe more often, but not as long? Or maybe we do 2 days, but we do them less, like once a year or something like that. And then what other kind of topics y'all might want to talk about? Or could the Park Service, like I know we talked about diversity, kind of education, and that maybe the Park Service can bring someone in to talk about that to all of y'all, or we could set up some kind of trainings and webinars, which I started once a long time ago, and then it kind of fell by the wayside, as we know these things do. So those were my thoughts and suggestions to kind of wrap up the what's been a really good couple days, I think. And then this is wide open to the rest of you. So do we want to, Pete, do you want to talk about your regional meetings? Because you've been doing them the longest. And some are familiar, but some are not, that are new. Can I put you on the spot? Are you here? Are you back?
I am back. Sorry, I was finishing up a phone call. What are you asking me to talk about?
Just to kind of talk to us about your regional meetings, because now you've done, and you're on mute. Because now I think you've done, what, 3? Have we done 3?
2, I think. We're starting to plan for the
Salt Lake and Santa Fe, right?
Yeah.
And you're starting to plan the 3rd one. So just kind of, I think you're the one with the most history on that, how it's working. And I know Northeast kind of followed your lead and I guess, last year that I got to go to. So anyway, y'all's thoughts and share your experience. That'd be great.
Well, I mean, I won't speak for anyone else as part of the, we're calling it the Plains and Rocky Mountain States CLG Summit, but certainly for me, I found it very useful. You know, yes, there's some logistical pieces of figuring out what we're going to talk about, how much time we have, what we're going to do, and all that sort of thing, but that's the same as in any other conference or meeting. You know, I've certainly enjoyed it. I've gotten a lot of good advice from my counterparts in those other states, and I hope that they've gotten some from me. Right now, we're talking about holding the third one this coming August in Denver. Colorado has volunteered, and that's a nice convenient place for, well, pretty much all of us. It's easy to get to. So yeah, not quite sure what else to say about and beyond. I would encourage anyone else who, you know, any other regional areas that are thinking about this to really look into it. And feel free to get in touch with me. I'm happy to share, you know, kind of what I've learned and some of the things I've put together in terms of organizing it. So yeah, I welcome any of those conversations.
And I do like the way Pete kind of plans it quite a ways out, which is helpful because we were able to, I think it was last year, give y'all some travel scholarship money. I think we managed to help with travel, especially for those that might not have any money. And we might be really in that situation. But that kind of helps me kind of plan for that. So,
I need
to ask for it.
We took advantage of, well, the CLG coordinators training at Forum the last couple times to do a meetup and talk about what we want to do and timing and all that sort of thing. And it helps us kind of be thinking about it on a regular basis instead of, you know, getting to, you know, spring of 2021 and going, oh yeah, we were going to do this thing. We should start thinking, no, if we're thinking about it now, we can put things together, and definitely having, you know, the support of NPS has made a big difference, and we very much appreciate it.
Great. Christy, I want to talk about the Northeast meeting. Again, I can't remember who was the instigator of that, but that was a good one. We did it up in Lowell. Anybody?
Sure. Wow. Putting me on the spot here.
We just want to see you. That's all.
I was going to throw Devin under the bus.
Oh, Devin. Oh, that's right. It was Devin too. I was like, who was the instigator?
I don't know. Maybe it was Devin. Maybe it was me. I think maybe it was kind of mutual at the same time.
Collaboration.
Hi, Devin.
How you doing?
Yeah, I found it great to meet as the Northeast. That was a year and a half ago, so we were able to meet in person. And we're small enough states here that it was easy for everybody to come in just for the one day to a central place in Massachusetts. And we picked Lowell, perfect spot because we get to walk around the city of Lowell and see the National Historic Park there as well. So Megan joined us, that was great. So we got some great discussions there with her, and then kind of taken in some questions ahead of time and worked on different discussions that we were all facing. So it was good to hear. It's good to hear just what other states are struggling with that are just right next to Massachusetts, but also having completely different issues at the same time, even though we're small New England states, having very different issues just in the way our SHPOs are set up. The way we do the HPF with the CLGs are very, very different. That was especially helpful for me to just hear how different SHPOs are handling their HPF with the CLGs. Yeah, I would like to do some more virtually. I'm setting up a lot of virtual meetings with my local commissions now, and I mean I never used Zoom at all before before any of this. And so it's all really new to me, but all just really, really useful. So hopefully when this pandemic is over sometime soon, I'll still keep doing these. So I'm doing weekly, just about a month ago or so, I started doing weekly either presentations with my local commissions, or we're going to start doing some roundtable discussions as well. So that way I don't have to do a presentation every time. I can just have it as an open question and answer for an hour and a half or so with my local commissions. We're going to have one just for CLG professional staff. So I'm trying to do it because it's so hard to do these Zooms, especially by myself. With a big group, you really have to have at least somebody in the background, and I'm doing these by myself. So I'm limiting all of them to 12 people. So just trying to be really specific on the topics and have 12 people in each session. They're pretty much filling up each time. And it's really, it seems like the right amount of people to have a good discussion.
Interesting. Devin, you were really the instigator, weren't you? I think you were.
Maybe. The topic came up when I was at one of the NAPC forum meetings and realized I was the only CLG person from a New England state that was able to go. So that got me thinking, let's do a regional get together. And I think the real benefit is that we could just really focus on CLG versus when you're at a conference and bombarded with so much information, things get lost. At least I can't remember everything. But having just a focused one day all about CLGs, and in New England, as Chris said, there are differences, but there are also a lot of similarities and things that we can pick up and copy what another state's doing. So I think ideally, if we can maybe do the regional meetings in the off year from the NAPC conference, that would be a great way to maintain some consistency and kind of build it into our calendars.
Great.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Devin, when do you want to plan the next one? Because I think that was awesome, and it would be great to get an update on where my fellow CLG coordinators are, since the last time we spoke, and see if Rhode Island's hanging in there and doing any better, or meet the new coordinator of New Hampshire. I think it would be great, and I think Connecticut couldn't make it, so that would be great to meet Connecticut too.
Yeah.
And certainly, if there's a way we can help technology-wise, we do have access to like a few platforms and that kind of thing. So if that's helpful, or y'all need that support while we're still doing virtual, let us know.
Great.
You can participate too, if you want us there. You don't have to.
Absolutely.
Have any of the other parts of the country thought about pulling one of these together? Have you been inspired to talk to each other regionally, or you just don't care?
So this is Curry. In some, periodically the Western states SHPOs get together, and it was once a year for a while, and then it sort of became every other year. And usually there's a CLG like component of that, which has been good. But yeah, we haven't done anything other than that. I will say this conversation kind of ties into some COVID-related changes or COVID-driven changes that we're doing, not so much with collaborating regionally, but this could apply to this effort. How it's happening on the small scale for us is we, with our Main Street network, started a weekly call immediately upon COVID happening, just because they all needed to be like, what are you doing right now? And then they realized that they actually really like having that one hour call every week just for the hot topics. And so they're talking about doing that every other week and replacing their quarterly meetings with that, or a portion of their quarterly meetings. And then following the NAPC forum, because normally I would get to see my CLG people at that forum, I just did a like open, here are the topics that we heard at the forum, let's share our thoughts about it. And I did an hour and a half, and there's definitely plenty of conversation to fill that time. And it was just super casual discussion style. So it was set up like a meeting like this. And we just went through some of the stuff like, that was nuts, I really want to do that. And they decided that they would like to do, my CLGs want to have that quarterly with a specific topic. So, so I think these shorter specific topic things feel doable, like they can fit it into the rest of their workload. I don't know, that just made me think of all of that. And that I think can apply to regional and national stuff too.
Yeah, I agree. Like this being 2 days is long, but it's also for us, or at least for me, to be able to carve out 2 days and just say, nope, we're doing CLGs and I'm not doing anything else. Kind of has to happen too, because I do find that when they're shorter and mixed in the day, then I tend to be doing 3 things at once. But yeah, where do you find that happy medium of how to do it? Well, but maybe we can help y'all host some regional ones or those up or that kind of thing. In addition to maybe doing this a little more often. I don't think we want to see each other weekly, but you know, we could do a just brown bag, like come in and chat with each other type of thing that we could set up that be standing and you can join it when you want to, kind of thing. So that might be kind of interesting. Okay. Any other thoughts on training? Any other topics that y'all would be interested in for yourselves? Like that you can ask my staff. I'm real big on making sure we get training, because I don't think I got training for like 15 years at the Park Service. So if there's something we can, you know, bring in a facilitator or a trainer or something for all of you, that'd be something we could probably do. Is there any, and diversity was definitely one. Anything else that might come to mind, like things you're dealing with, like codes or ADA or things like that? Or of course we have flooding and disaster stuff. But.
Well, to quickly backtrack real quick, for the meetings, Jim Gabbert over in the NR section, he's starting to do like a quarterly get together of all the state NR coordinators that are his responsibility, where we get together for an hour or two and just discuss topics. He passes on guidance, the latest stuff from Park Service based upon the nominations that he's been reviewing and things like that. And we do it through Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, that's so our platform at work.
Yeah, so he just sent an email today asking if we wanted any specific topics for our next gathering, which is going to be in October.
Okay. I think I suggested that to Jim, for the record. It's probably over a bottle of wine that I suggested it. Okay, chapter 9 looks like that might be something, and we do need to get that new coordinator training ready for y'all on diversity. And we don't have to decide this right now. I just want to kind of, if someone had a if someone had a suggestion that maybe you all would be like yes or no, or what do you think? I'll let you ponder it.
I don't know if it just came to mind, if there's any training out there about effective presentation skills for online meetings. You know, I'm very well versed in doing a public presentation in front of an audience and getting engagement and reading the crowd, and totally different in this format. And if this is something we'll be using a lot more often, I'd be interested in kind of tips and tricks for Zoom meeting audience engagement type training.
I think that'd be a great idea. Stephanie and I actually talked about that. And I don't know, I feel like we had Michelle Pearson come in and do some training for us once. about using different platforms and things like that in one of our state CLG meetings. But I imagine she's a teacher. So I thought about reaching out to her and seeing if maybe that was something we could do with her. So that I think is something I would like to take that too. So
yeah, great.
That's a great idea. And then we've got some suggestions in the chat on something on the history of redlining and gentrification. I think that would be really interesting. We actually have funded a really interesting story map project in DC that talks about the covenants that were used to enforce racial segregation and that kind of thing. So definitely we could tap into some of these projects that we paid for, right? And have them do some presentations. So.
Hey, Megan.
Yes.
Not that it's my place, but to jump in on presentation tips for Zoom. There's been a lot more stuff coming up recently for obvious reasons, but one thing, and I hesitate to use the word, but if you look into anything like how to be a better vlogger or how to be more engaging while vlogging, it's the same thing because you're effectively making a video for a bunch of people that you can't see or hear. So it's very much the same thing, and it really ends up being, and there's a lot of tips and stuff like that, but it ends up being about tonal fluctuations in your voice, you know, and which is the whole reason why motivational speakers get paid what they get paid or are as good as they are, is because of how they present it. But there's that to start, but there's also a bunch of Zoom ones and that stuff popping up recently, but it's all the same tips in a way, in case that helps as well.
Okay, great. Sean will tap into you for that as well. Okay, and I'm seeing gentrification as an option too. So it sounds like a good list of things so far. And if you think of other things, let us know and we can try to find some experts. And I think we have a lot of expertise just at the Park Service we can tap into as well. So if there was a certain technical issue you're dealing with, I know we talked about codes and substitute materials and things like that in the past. So we could certainly pull some of that together. Jen actually has a good kind of, you saw Lisa's kind of start to the presentation today of that overview for flood guidance, but she has one that's a little more on the technical side about what those solutions could be as part of her work with the guidelines. So that could be something we could do as well. Okay. Vacancy. Oh, vacant buildings. That's yeah. Okay. Well, I feel like we might be seeing each other more often. Okay. What else do y'all want to talk about? The rest of the time is yours. Is someone have a burning question that did not get answered during our 2 days together? What else is out there that we need to be aware of and thinking about?
I'll ask a question because I could use some happy news right now. So anybody have like a really cool recent CLG grant project or CLG win in your area?
Well,
I can share the fact that we've been successfully surveying and resurveying a lot of communities. That's always great. And last year, City of Jacksonville went all out on its African American resources, and with a CLG grant, with one grant, they funded 2 multiple property submissions, 3 individual National Register nominations. So we have now a multiple property submission for properties designed by African American architects in the City of Jacksonville. We have a multiple property document now for African American cemeteries in Duval County. So that's great. And we listed a cemetery, which was the first privately owned African American cemetery in the City of Jacksonville, where the city's first Black millionaire was interred, and there were a lot of other notable people there. We did a historic African American neighborhood that had a lot of houses that were designed by African American architects who actually lived in the neighborhood. And that also included some civil rights sites associated with the organization of the NAACP's response to Axe Handle Saturday down in Jacksonville, where it was protests associated with sit-ins, and then the African Americans who were in the main park, they were assaulted by people using axe handles and beaten pretty badly. But we listed the neighborhood, and that neighborhood was really interesting in light of the redlining stuff, because I found the redlining maps for City of Jacksonville. And it was interesting because it seemed like the Home Loan Development Corporation, or whatever that federal agency was that created the maps, it seemed like they couldn't figure out how the heck to classify this neighborhood, because it wasn't actually within any of their standard classifications. It wasn't a good investment, but it wasn't a bad investment either. It wasn't redlined. Because it was a neighborhood for, you know, essentially middle class or upper middle class African Americans who had stable jobs and good income, and, you know, technically would have been a safe bet for a lender to lend to. So that was really interesting. And then let's say, and we did a historic church, and one of my staff used the multiple property document that the city funded, and he used that as context for a Gullah Geechee associated cemetery. So we're at Jacksonville, that northeastern Florida area is just the southern end of the Gullah Geechee corridor that stretches from like North Carolina through South Carolina and Georgia. And the cemetery was associated with a group of African Americans that moved down from Edisto Island in South Carolina right after the Civil War. And they established themselves there. And it's like the last remnant of their community. So that's been super productive. And we've been really lucky that the CLG grants combined with our state grants here have been producing a lot of very useful projects in terms of survey, in terms of National Register listing. They also do a number of educational projects and other types of things, but my section's not as involved in that. And here in Florida, the CLG in terms of managing the program is completely separate from grants. We have a completely separate grants section. They handle all the applications, the management of the grants, the processing of payments and deliverables. So we only get to see specific deliverable items, or like reviewing some contracts and stuff at the very beginning, make sure that they're getting a reputable consultant. So I can't really speak to all of the other CLG projects that we do, but we're going all out. And the Hurricane Michael grants, I will tell you that like 75% of the projects that I've been seeing coming through applying for those grants are African American associated resources. You know, we've got various properties that need fixing or survey or documentation of one type of the damage that was done by the hurricane, and things like that. So it's really interesting right now, and the timing is really interesting with the larger, you know, cultural milieu that's going on right now with the Black Lives Matter and all that stuff. It's like we're really paying a lot of attention to those resources at the moment, and the CLG program is facilitating that.
Thank you, Ruben. What other good news? There's a lot of
a little bit of good news that we found out just today. This last year, we funded a preservation plan for the city of Nampa, which was very well done. And somehow it got submitted to the Idaho chapter of the APA, and they are giving an award for a preservation plan at their conference coming up next month. So first time that I know of that we've had a preservation plan get an award from our local chapter of the APA. And that's kind of cool.
That's exciting. And was that CLG funded?
Yeah, it was.
Great. Well, when the award happens, send us some stuff so we can publicize it.
Will do. Thanks.
Yeah.
Arizona has a lot of out-of-date design guidelines, and primarily because our newish deputy came from Charleston, where he saw what happened there when there was a major lawsuit about their design guidelines. He's come with me as we've traveled around the state talking about how they need to update their design guidelines, and we think we have 4 that are actively working on it right now, mostly through CLG grants.
Great. There's quite a conversation going on in the chat about circuit riders. And do any of y'all have experience with the circuit rider program that you'd like to share? I know a few of you have had them, but kind of, and I think in the manner of it's helpful for those CLGs that don't have staff, right? Regional planning offices were often one of the keys that kind of assisted those. Anybody have any circuit rider stories they want to share? We'll just leave it in the chat. It's okay.
I can just mention ours. Ours tend to be more focused on project-specific kinds of things, maybe specific threats to buildings. So working more with they work a lot, the circuit riders in Massachusetts are staff to our statewide nonprofit organization. So they're with an organization called Preservation Massachusetts, and I'd say it works well because they just have a very different mission goal than and setup than I would in the SHPO office. So they can work a lot more closely with property owners. They can talk a lot more about other funding possibilities, and get outside of some of just the regulatory aspects of a local commission. So I think it's overall, I think it's a good setup to have the circuit riders, if they're working like that, to actually have them over at the statewide organization instead. And then the circuit rider has also been working with me on regional training as well. So that's worked really well because when I do my regional training in person, usually my outreach is only to local commissions. So I tend to get, I'll do a regional training and maybe get 20 people there, but their mailing list is just much bigger than ours and goes way beyond just local commissions. So whenever I do a training session in cooperation with the circuit riders from our statewide, we usually have like at least 50 people showing up for it. So that's worked well.
That's great.
I'll say in Tennessee, I don't know of any circuit riders going out working with multiple CLGs per se, but we do have something set up where part of our HPF fund every year goes to preservation planner positions in our 9 development districts. I don't know if those are unique to Tennessee or not, but the development districts basically like provide a lot of services to their non-government organizations that provide sort of government services to rural areas. And we fund a preservation planner who some of them go to quite a few CLG meetings and provide expertise and support, not at every meeting, but they're great boots on the ground people for when I can't get to, 6 hours away when there's some kind of crisis going on. And so that's a pretty successful thing that we've been doing for a long time in Tennessee. And then just sharing like other good news. It's not a CLG project exactly, but because of the Heritage Protection Act with the monuments and our office being involved in that whole business, we have an extra staff person who just handles communication now, but she has been so fantastic at also doing a lot of our SHPO communications and really being active on social media and a newsletter and spreading the word about the CLG program, and more than I could just myself, and are starting to see more interest. So it's kind of a making lemonade out of lemons situation, for sure.
Back to the circuit rider, we actually are in the process of kind of discussing job duties for one that will actually be associated and funded through our Mississippi Delta National Heritage Area. We work really closely with them, and they're very kind of more preservation oriented. We have 3 heritage areas in the state of Mississippi. So we have a meeting actually next week with the board of directors to discuss what those job responsibilities might look like for that person, and how they could potentially benefit all of the communities that are CLGs, but also the entire heritage area as well. And so I talked actually yesterday in the office hours with, I guess, whoever, I can't remember who exactly was over that. Yes. Yeah. So we talked yesterday morning about some potential responsibilities, because there's often, some confusion with the local communities on who exactly they're supposed to be contacting about certain things. If you start throwing in, people that are working with CLGs on certain aspects of, preservation, and, oh, are we supposed to contact the SHPO or the heritage area or whatever? So we'll keep you posted on that. We'll see how it goes.
Good. Yeah. I think we've tried to work pretty closely in our office with the heritage areas, and know that they've had some gatherings and brought them all in, and we've done some speaking, just letting them know about the grant programs and all, and they really are interested and have kept in touch. So, and we have a couple of heritage areas that have received competitive grants. So that might also be another place to think about. I know we talked a little bit about what if the state applies, but someone else owns it, but it might be maybe a heritage area could apply for a survey grant or something like that. So it's not, the burden is not on you to manage it all. They could do that in partnership or those types of things. So definitely a resource. What other good news do we have? I like this, positive.
I guess I can share two things from Nebraska. Oh, let me start my video since I'm talking. Omaha is by far Nebraska's largest city. And they have had a pretty active CLG program for a number of years, since pretty much the beginning, but they've never had a real good preservation handbook that just has all of their comprehensive design guidelines, procedures, that sort of thing. So they are undertaking that as a project this year, and I'm pretty excited about that. Ruben, I'm sure you're happy to hear that. So yeah, they've had questions from their public over the years, process of how to do this, and we have to submit a project, what do we do? So I'm really, really excited about that, because they've concentrated on surveys and NR nominations in both districts, individual nominations, multiple property submissions, which those are all great, but they've kind of neglected this part that the public actually, they could really use with that. So excited for that. And then we have one of our most recent CLGs were certified, gosh, I think 2014 to, Ruben, this is Auburn. They were certified to do, get a specific, grant for a specific project. But then after that really didn't do a whole lot and didn't hear much from them, never applied for grants, lovely people, but just not very interested. They attended one conference and are now like all in. It's so exciting to see, their, the person head of their commission and a few of their commission members are now, trying to attend training every year. They're submitting for grants every year. They started small, which was fine, like $2,000–3,000, but that's fine. This last one was for like $23,000 that they want to help with, talk about their, historic resources in the community and help with a birthday celebration, to talk about, do walking tours and interior walking tours of buildings into. So they're really excited about this. And I'm happy to see that they went from this really sleepy, kind of not doing a lot, to doing one thing and then just getting really excited.
That's great. It's that excitement factor, right? It helps.
Yeah.
It keeps us all going.
For that community, they have really interested people on the commission. Their city council doesn't really care about historic preservation, and the commission would like to do more and have more design review authority, but they've been told by their city council they are not willing to amend their ordinance. So I've been trying to encourage them. So what are ways that you can, still work on, preservation projects in your community that don't have to deal with your ordinance? So that's why they're doing a lot of education stuff now.
It's important. I think I was up with Michael in Minnesota, and one of the presentations was about a community that, had their ordinance and did design review and all this, and maybe got a little strict, lost their ordinance. And then what did they do? So then they kind of started from a place of education again. And I was like, yes, this is why we have to go beyond design review. Like, it's my favorite statement. So, so I think that's important. I'm curious if any of y'all had projects that might relate to all these kids being at school at home now. I know Shay posted in the chat, and I'm gonna make her tell us about it. They had a youth project. Shay, can you tell us about your project you mentioned?
Yeah, not a problem. So the CLG coordinator for the city of Ardmore here in Oklahoma actually approached us about the idea of this activity book after I kind of pressed them on reaching out to the kids, finding a way to involve the kids, because if we lose all of them now, there won't be preservationists later. And so they kind of ran with it. I think she had her research and everything written within the first 3 weeks of her contract because she was just so excited about it. In addition to doing that activity book, she's also approached the Boy Scouts related to an HP badge that it's in one of the badges, kind of a historic preservation aspect, but there's not one that's a kind of a full focus. So she was going to approach them about whether they could get that done. So it could be something else for kids to potentially receive. The book itself is a mixture. I put the link up there. It's just kind of a proof version and a mixture of drawing and crosswords and word searches. In Ardmore's case, they kind of coordinated with the local Main Street to actually set it up that they have a badge that once they complete this, then they can go to the Main Street office and get this badge as a junior preservationist. And then they take these out to some of the community events that they have in the town. Mostly the activity stuff at those events is done by the CLG themselves. Some of that includes, you know, building historic structures with Legos and different things like that that's just fun for kids. And they've sold out of almost all of the, or not sold out, but they've given out almost all of the books so far. And this year they're just using their money to, you know, revamp that supply. And the town newspaper did a huge thing on it, which kind of went out to more than just that community. And then another one of our communities, Anadarko, which happens to be a kind of the Indian Nation area here, they switched their money from workshops that they were going to be doing in person because of COVID and funneled all of that into doing that activity book. So they didn't have to send any of their money back. They were able to do that. They got the crayons for the kids. They got the books for the kids. And he's having equal luck with people wanting copies of this at this point. And it's just been incredibly successful for our CLGs.
Get them young, right?
That's right.
We have our deputy CLG coordinator already.
Megan, here in Kansas, we worked with our education department here at the Kansas Historical Society back before COVID. They have a regular program they do one Wednesday every month. It's called Homeschool Wednesdays, where they invite kids regionally who are homeschoolers to come and do different programming. And there's always a topic. So we actually used the Junior Rangers booklet from the Park Service and kind of built our own little curriculum off of that based on like Topeka history. And there was a lot of hands-on stuff. Like we looked at the original Sanborn maps that we have in the archive, and we looked at different building materials and things like that. So I don't know that it would translate to online learning, but maybe it could be adapted. And I think the Junior Ranger booklet has a good sort of format or outline that you could use to maybe tailor it to local history or more regional or state history. So that's an idea.
Ooh. Have all of y'all seen the Junior Ranger Historic Preservation book? The Park Service did. Actually, Jen Eggleston, that worked with us before in Steel Pig and is now our, I think she's our chief of staff now. She worked on it as a project in a goal training that she was in. And I think we have quite a few boxes of them around. So if it's something you're interested in, we have been known to ship out boxes of them to different state offices. Colorado was giving them out right and left, but it's the same. It's the Park Service's Junior Ranger program, and I believe we ordered more badges as well. But if you're interested in that, shoot one of us a note and we can check on that. Again, it's hard copy, so it's a little harder to do. I mean, we could send them out, but you can't just give them out, right? If you're not having visitors and those types of things. But it is a good idea, and in fact, I think. I want to say it was maybe at that Northeast meeting, I can't remember where, but some folks suggested that maybe their commissioners should take it your CLG commissioners and see if they could pass it, because it is about the National Historic Preservation Act. And, and if they can't pass the Junior Ranger book, then you got some issues there. So, yeah. Okay, what else do we want to share? What else good is going on? This is happy. We've got a few people that have to jump off. So thank you everyone for participating. It is 5:30 and I think we said we'd go till 6, but we can always stop early. But for everybody that has to hop off, thank you for participating. I know it's kind of a long 2 days, but I feel like we owed it to you. And we can definitely work on continuing to meet a little more often, and maybe not as long, I think is what I'm hearing. So yeah. What else? Anybody else have anything else they'd like to talk about? Now's your chance. You cannot tell me you didn't have enough time to talk this time if you don't mention it now.
Not just right now. I'm actually responding to an email about a community that's worried that they weren't able to meet enough this year because of COVID. Their meetings were canceled. So I'm taking it. I'm being lenient with communities. I recognize that the pandemic is something, you know, they have no control over whether their government shuts down or not and cancels all their meetings and stays canceled for months on end. So I'm being very flexible with them. They just have to document it in their annual reports. I'm just asking them, give me the dates of the meetings that were canceled, the reason why they're canceled, and I'll, you know, this year it'll be okay. Next year you have Zoom.
You won't, if it works. Right? Yeah. Vicki, you said something about a Illinois build your own building. I don't know about that. Does John know about that?
I found that earlier. Actually, I was looking at all the different websites, all the SHPA websites, because I wanted to look at their state plans, and I just happened to find that. And they were like HO scale models of historic buildings in Illinois, and kids could print them on cardstock and then like build your own Main Street kind of thing.
I think that predates me. I think that's something to do with Main Street. I mean, I have to talk with some of my coworkers, but I think that's what it's related to.
It was cool.
Yeah, that'd be neat.
The Michigan Historic Preservation Network has something like that on their website too. They've got like a barn, a church, historic inn, things like that that kids can print out and build the models of. So that may be one to check out as well.
And Vicki, we are working to get all of the state plans. This is a nudge at David on to the IRMA site. So you should be able to hopefully do one-stop shopping and see all
That's great. Oh, that's awesome.
That is definitely on the list of things to do.
Yeah, the instructions for doing that will be in the email, the unofficial approval email, and I'm updating that now to include all this IRMA stuff. I almost said Norma. Okay, thanks.
Christy is asking if anyone has a go-to article or literature that they share with people who are completely unfamiliar with preservation and what local program benefits there are. Does anybody have, do y'all have a publication? I mean, I know some of you have a what is the CLG, that kind of thing, publication.
I think the one I've been using most frequently recently is the one that Place Economics just put out on 24 reasons why historic preservation is good for your community. It's very graphic and engaging and comprehensive.
Great. Any other people, anyone else have other suggestions for that intro piece? Try not to scare them away at the beginning. Okay. All right. What else? What else do we have? I'm not gonna torture y'all to death and make you stay.
So I actually have
have an unrelated question. It's not a good news thing, but it's a question. We're thinking about maybe using some CLG funds for interns to do a big survey update, and it would be in a CLG community. I mean, pending their interest and willingness and pending the competitive grant cycle, of course, but if it worked out, we would love to fund some interns to come and do this big survey update. And so what kinds of things would you recommend being careful about? I mean, would we need to stick to the GSA rates for stipends and that kind of thing? Or would we be allowed to do a flat rate and say, we're just gonna give you guys X amount of money per month? Or would we be allowed to provide them with housing, or how does that work?
Most of that will be up to your state procurement kind of guidelines. So, you know, if you don't have any guidance on that, which I'm sure you do, then you could use like the federal per diem rates or things like that. But yeah, a flat kind of stipend would work as well.
Okay, we'll have to look that up then. Most
of that wouldn't be a problem. I would encourage you to maybe look at the survey, the CR surveyor, just because if there's interns, Deidre McCarthy likes to call the CR surveyor controlled crowdsourcing. So, you know, if they don't have a lot of experience in architectural survey, that type of thing, then it does give them the terminology and those types of things. So,
yeah.
And kind of gives you some control to the data. So.
That's a good idea, especially for adding buildings to the survey that weren't previously part of it. I mean, updating existing conditions and integrity is one thing, but coming across, say, an L building or some other small vernacular building that wasn't part of the original survey, they would need to make a new entry for it. So that's a good idea.
You could probably build the, you know, whatever cost of customization or assistance you need through NAPC from GIS. I think you could probably build that into the.
That's a good idea. Okay. Yeah, we're going to explore that.
Okay.
I have a question, as long as we're talking about grant projects. And this is totally hypothetical. But I know it mentions in the grants manual that the development of ordinances are an eligible HPF expense. I don't think it gets into a lot of detail about the content. And so I'm wondering if certain ordinances that are not directly historic preservation, but something closely related, like say for a conservation district or that sort of thing, are those eligible?
Yeah, I think you just need to ensure that, you know, there's nothing being developed in the ordinance that goes against secondary standards or those kinds of policies. But yeah, conservation district ordinance would qualify.
Yeah, again, it's totally hypothetical. We have enabling legislation that allows conservation districts in Kentucky. I don't know any communities that are actually using them at this point. I'd be hesitant to want to encourage that in an area where I feel like the resources might be eligible for the National Register. I don't know if you all have an official policy about that or not.
I mean, we do have policies related to development work, right? So if you're going to do construction, it needs to be listed, but we certainly wouldn't. I mean, I think you can make the case that a conservation district assists eligible properties. You know, it's more of a planning tool, I guess, right?
Right. It's a planning
so
tool.
that's a little less restrictive.
I just wonder if it would be a problem like down the road if they decided to use it in an area that clearly is more where the resources are more intact and would actually be better served by a more traditional historic preservation ordinance. But maybe they don't think the community would support it, like designation for that neighborhood or something.
Yeah, Vicki, I could be wrong, but the way we have a lot of conservation versus preservation districts in Tennessee, and the way I've always talked about it and thought about it is that a conservation district is not inconsistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. It's just not applying as much of like a level of design review. So nothing that's reviewed, everything that's reviewed is reviewed according to SOI standards, but some things aren't reviewed. Many things aren't, like windows and maybe like siding materials and stuff like that. So that's kind of how maybe it's kind of a semantic runaround thing, but that's how we talk about conservation districts not being, you know, a violation of Secretary of Interior standards. It also helps that we only have one kind of enabling legislation in Tennessee. We don't have, it's all just called historic zoning, whether the neighborhood, whether the community is choosing to call it preservation or conservation is kind of up to them. And I see the difference is in the guidelines, not in the ordinance.
We did have a problem last year when we had a National Register district that was trying to go for designation as one of our local ordinance districts, and they had pre-written design guidelines that specifically allowed things that were not in accordance with the Secretary of the Interior standards. It wasn't just that they were exempting things from review. It was that they were saying that in certain cases, vinyl siding might be a good option, things like that. And we really felt like in that case, that wasn't something that we were going to be able to have any part in funding, because it was giving people advice that was, you know, antithetical to what we would be telling them, not just exempting the review on those things. But I mean, I don't know whether or not that would be how everyone would see it. It's just, to me, that was different.
It's preemptive on your part.
I mean, the way I would like to see a conservation district always written in terms of the ordinance is that there's a number of things that are exempt. There are a number of things that have a binding regulatory review. And there's a bunch of things in the middle that have only an advisory level review. So in the end, the commission can say, no, this does not meet our design guidelines, or this doesn't meet the Secretary of the Interior standards. But in the end, the property owner can go ahead and do it because it was in that mid-level of an advisory level review. It's still a required review. They still have to go through the process. So there's still a discussion. And I love conservation districts for that reason, because it can have, instead of a real point of conflict over a project, there can be a real open discussion about the best approach to a project. So I think that's a real benefit of a conservation district that way. And you can definitely still stay on higher ground by saying, no, it doesn't meet the standards, but you can, sorry, John, this doesn't meet the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. But in the end, they can go ahead and do it. So the downside, of course, of that is that you get some really unfortunate projects that might take place. But if you want something stronger, then you go for a stronger ordinance as a local historic district. I really think conservation district should be something well under the range of what a local historic district it should be doing.
And I know Robin Ziegler in Nashville, in Tennessee, she's done a lot of work and does some trainings for NAPC on conservation districts. I've done some presentations with her. So I think she's definitely kind of she would be my go-to expert. But I have heard her say that, you know, you think it's a step to a preservation ordinance, but then it often doesn't become one. You just, the conservation district. So, but that,
yeah, working with Robin all the time, actually, I've total example. Oh no, I woke the baby up. Okay. We grant funded with a CLG grants a design guideline consolidation project for the conservation districts, all the various conservation districts in Nashville. And yeah, we didn't really see any problem with it. Maybe we should have thought about that, but I think it was okay. Yeah.
I will say that here in Florida, we have a couple, they're not as common as you would think here, but town of Palm Beach just has been in the process of essentially establishing a pseudo conservation district because Well, all the property owners are vehemently against any type of historic district designation down there. They've got a number of individual listings on their local register and on the national, but there is consistent opposition to any type of local or national register historic districts. So the town council went about and they established a like a conservation style district, primarily so that they could have some input into all of the flood adaptation stuff that's going on down there. You know, if you don't know about Palm Beach, that's where all the money is in that part of Eastern Florida. And it's on the barrier island, and it's all 1920s Spanish and Mediterranean revival, you know, mansions and stuff. So there's tons of money there, and a lot of very big political egos that they have to deal with. And so they sought that conservation approach as an appropriate way for their needs to get at least a little bit of preservation going on, and getting some communal management into what's essentially just a whole bunch of individual properties.
What other questions? This is all good.
Yeah,
I find local commissions
really
are often afraid to, oh, go ahead, Vicki.
I just wanted to say, I think this kind of discussion is really helpful, at least for me.
Go ahead, Chris.
I find with a lot of commissions, they're, for political reasons, they're afraid to say no to a project. And so they say yes to things that are completely just really don't meet the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. And the conservation district model really helps with that, because they can still say, I'd much rather have them say no, to not have the ability to only have an advisory level review, but say no, than say yes to something that is really inappropriate.
Good point.
Those are all good points and good things to think about.
All right. We've got our junior preservationist has joined us. So there he is. So cute. Okay, you're getting information on how to join the Nick SHPO listserv, which all of you can, but the Park Service is not allowed to, so don't look for any answers from us. But we do participate in the NAPC listserv, and I actually have a few folks from the register, folks from tax, to try to stay on there to answer questions when it's appropriate for the Park Service to do that. But Nick SHPO, you're on your own. I don't know what they say on there. All right. Anybody else have a burning question? Okay. Well, if not, Vicki, do you have one? No? Oh. You look like you were gonna talk. Okay. Well, all right. Well, interrupt me if you come up with something, but otherwise, I think we can close this out just a touch early if you want to, or we can stay on and people can chat or just gossip, or I don't care. But I want to say thank you for everybody participating. Thank you to my staff for pulling this together. We will plan a little more next time. This is our first big virtual event like this. So thank you to Sean for keeping us straight in the technology area. And thank you all for your wonderful comments and insights and all the hard work that you're doing out there. This is always kind of that inspirational moment of the year for me, and hopefully my staff got to see that too, because that's what kind of keeps us going the rest of the year, right? So we share and commiserate and celebrate together, so that's important. So we will work on kind of a more get-togethers and come up with a plan for that. And I think you'll be getting an evaluation on this training. We're hopefully going to set that up digitally and send that out to y'all to to share, to respond to in the next day or so. So appreciate you doing that. And in the meantime, if you have a brilliant idea tomorrow morning that you want to share with the group, you can pull the list of state CLG coordinators down from the CLG website. So when you log on as a state coordinator, and if you need your logon, you know where to send that email to, stlpig@nps.gov. So you can pull a list of the CLG coordinators from there. So if you're wanting to plan a regional meeting or you want to send an email out to the group, feel free to take advantage of that. We do have a Facebook group, but I haven't kept up with it as well as I should. And we could try to reinstitute that if you want to. But I hope that you all have targeted someone that you want to ask questions of, and you guys can talk back and forth to each other. I know that does happen, and I'm glad that's so. Okay, well, with that, I will let y'all run away unless anyone has anything they want to share at the last minute. Okay, it's these weird silences that I don't do well on virtual. Oh, a thumbs up. That was good. Okay, I like that.
Turn some mics off and say thank you.
Thank you.
It was just nice to
thanks.
see everybody, really.
Yeah.
Good. So it's good for all of us. So we'll try to do more of this.
Yeah,
thank you.
Don't forget, you can save the chat for like all those links and stuff. Just go down there and click on the 3 dots and just save that.
I did that yesterday, I remember, and Sean reminded me. It was good. So yes, I will do that again, and then we'll share that back out to y'all along with where the recordings will be, so you can watch those. And I personally am very happy that we now have a recording of John doing the hierarchy of law. So I've always wanted to do that, and now we have it. So does anyone on Steel Pig want to say anything before we take off?
I just wanted to mention I put the group, the Facebook group in the chat. So if you are interested in using that as a forum after this, any questions you may have forgotten, things like that, that is in there.
Great, great. Okay. Well, let's all sign off for one last time. If you want to stay on and talk to each other, feel free. And we will, hopefully we'll talk again soon, okay? And I'm doing my bowing instead of hugging, so all right, thank y'all.
Try to see.
Good evening.
We don't really know how to wave yet. I have to wave.
No.
There we go. Oh,
everybody.
Got it. He's got it.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
He is named
Thank
the
you,
Lord
everyone.
Morris of the arts and crafts movement.